Got another awesome studio for you today. So I've talked about my good friend Jeremy Horn on here multiple times. Today we're going to head over to Memphis to Paloma Sound Studios to show off his amazing home/commercial studio. It's really a commercial studio at his home.
I'm born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, right here where I'm still currently living. So, been here all my life, 45 years. Grew up in southeast Shelby County, and then in the 90s lived in the dirty Dover, which we call Cordova, Tennessee. And then I've lived in East Memphis since like 2000 or so. And that's where I'm still at. So great, love to be here. Played in bands, Christian bands from like 15 on, songwriting, writing my own songs. And then somehow when I was 18 years old, a guy named John Fry at Ardent Studios gave me a job at his recording studio. And I knew nothing about recording, and somehow he gave me keys to the building and let me in and out of that place on a regular basis. So that's how I kind of got in the studio world. And then when I was 23, I started working for my church, which is Renewal Church here in town. And I've been there in full time since 2000. So I've been around a minute. I'm doing the same thing, traveling the country, playing music and leading worship and recording people. And besides that, being a dad and a husband, which is the most important thing. That's what I've been doing with my life. So that's my background.
Now, how did you land on the Ardent label and record records? In the 90s, I was working for the studio. So Ardent has a commercial studio with 3 amazing rooms, like world-class studios. But they also have a mainstream label and a Christian label they had back in the day. So John, who owns the studio, became a believer, I think, in the 80s, and he had already had, Ardent Music, which was the mainstream label. And so when he became a believer and started following Jesus, he was like, we should put out Christian records too. So he started Ardent Records, and that was with a guy named Dana Key of the band DeGarmo and Key, and a guy named Pat Scholes, who was the executive producer, who's just an all-around super smart business guy. And all these guys I admire to the max. Like they're amazing people. So they started a Christian label in the late 80s, early 90s, and partnered with this company called Forefront Records, which is a record company in Nashville that put out DC Talk and that little band called DC Talk. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. A bunch of other artists, but they also put out all the Ardent Records, which was at the time was a band called Skillet. You may have heard of them. Big Tent Revival, Small Town Poets, a guy named Todd Agnew, myself, a whole list of other people. Satellite Soul, a bunch of people. So I actually left Ardent in the early 2000s to go to work for my church and got signed to another record label called Music from the Grove, which this guy named Bruce Carroll started. And Bruce has won a bunch of Grammys. He's a super talented guy as well. And when my deal was up with that label, I ended up going to John Fry at Ardent and just saying, hey, I'm in the middle of making this live worship record. And I was talking to some people at Integrity Music down in Mobile, and I'm not sure what to do. And John just said, well, why don't you let us put the record out? Well, for me, I was like, let's do it. It's like, that's like family to me. It's like they know me, they love me, they know my family, they know what I'm about. And so honestly, it was a dream my whole life to be signed to Ardent Records. I mean, I'd worked for the studio and I had worked for Dana on the label side doing A&R stuff for him before I was ever signed to the label. So it all kind of came full circle for me. It's like a full family affair. And so getting to make 5 records for Ardent was amazing. So that I'm super thankful to John and to Dana and to everybody else there. God rest their souls. They're not with us anymore, but those guys have been such a huge influence on my life. So that's how I kind of got into the mainstream Christian music world. Yeah. Now tell us about this space and this story.
Okay, so when I started, after I got off the road, I was always kind of in and out of the studio, helping other people with projects, recording or producing or just playing, just being moral support. I've always been in and out of studios. I actually started going to studios and recording in them when I was 15 years old.
So I've been doing this for 30 years. I always feel bad about telling them my age, but I've earned this gray hair, you know. So for 30 years I've been doing this, and when I just felt like my time around art, it was up, and so I didn't know what I was going to do. I had a little bitty recording rig. Honestly, if you'll look over here, I'll show you. I had like one of these, this little Apollo thing. I had this compressor right here, and I had like this mic pre right here. This is all I had, and it was all racked up into one little box. And I had a couple of speakers, which are right over in the corner, right over there. And I just had them set up at the church where I work. And it was just a little bitty room. There's no treatment, but I was just kind of working out of it. But I was always working and staying busy and working for other people, recording things or doing different projects. And so I just felt like I think it was it was probably 2018 or something. I just felt like the Lord was telling me that I needed to build a studio. Now, you have to understand something. The idea of doing that is like, I feel like, this is what I tell people. I feel like I was Noah and God told me to build an ark. Like what's an ark? You know what I mean? It never rained. Nobody ever seen a flood. They'd never seen anything like that. So all the time when the Lord told me, I want you to build a studio space, I was like, okay, but I thought it was crazy. You know what I mean? Like literally, I was like, you know, I feel like I was like Noah out there sawing. Like, hey Noah, what are you doing? I'm building an ark. Were you building what? You're building a giant boat? Why? You know, I just didn't know why. So building this has really been an act of faith. I just feel like I knew that's what the Lord wanted me to do, and so my wife and I, we sort of got a plan together, Denise, and I just told her what I wanted to do, and this studio is called Paloma Sound, but what it should really be called is My Wife is Awesome, because she really believed in me enough to like let me do this. So I got the plans together. I had a friend, an architect friend of mine, help me draw it out. My friend Chris Jackson from Ardent, who is literally one of the most brilliant people I know in the world. He can fix anything. He knows studio math. He's an electrician. He can electrical engineer. He can do anything. He helped me come up with the design for the studio, all the ratios, because you know all these rooms there's no square walls in a studio, so it's like all these ratios for how to make sure these rooms sound good. And so we get it all down on paper and then go to build it in the middle of COVID. Like I literally started building the studio in the middle of COVID. So you're watching lumber prices and everything else go sky high. So I just had to kind of, again, act in faith and be like, I know this is what the Lord told me to do. I'm just going to build this ark, you know? And much to my joy and delight, it got finished. And thank goodness to my parents, my mom and dad, Ed and Linda Hort, they helped me big time, because this wouldn't have happened because of all that stuff happening. You know, the funds kind of run out when you're in the middle of a pandemic and you can't get lumber. So we were able to build this place. We've been open for the past 2 years or so, and we've just seen a steady stream of people coming in to make music and be creative. And you know, what we wanted in this place is just to really be a hub for people to feel comfortable. You know, when you go to a lot of studios, commercial studios, one thing you'll notice is there's no windows. This place is full of windows. You don't really get access to the outside, and you constantly feel this pressure to be looking at the clock like, I'm spending, you know, X number of dollars an hour and I'm going broke by being in here. I just didn't want that vibe in here. I wanted it to be like, hey, this is part of our home. This is part of our community. You know, when people come in here, I want them to feel relaxed. Like literally, there's a screen porch right out here. That's sort of the lounge area. There's a pool in my backyard. It's like when bands come into town or they're here for multiple days, I want to be like, hey, I know we just got done tracking drums. Let's all go swimming. Let's all cook out. Let's go have burgers. Let's just be together, you know? And so that's been the vibe in the heart of Paloma since we started it. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful to have it, and the opportunity to really honestly love people by helping them make their music.
I love that. All right, the console is sort of the center of any studio. So you've told the story before, but tell us the story of.
Oh yeah, so this is a Trident Series 70 from like 1978 or 79. I'm actually born in 78. So this console actually belonged to the guy who's currently playing bass for the band Soul Asylum. Do you remember that band, Soul Asylum? Remember Runaway Train and all that stuff, and Somebody to Shove? I loved that band in the 90s. So he had it for sale online, and he lives in Minneapolis. So I had just gotten off the road from a big long run, and just honestly, the Lord has blessed us. You know, I was still like doing the music, like the artist thing, and not some. You know, I've always did ministry, but I still had a bunch of merch for sale, all that kind of stuff. So we did okay on that run. So I had a pocket full of cash, burning a hole in my pocket. And I told Denise, because we were already planning on building a studio. This is before we built it. I want to buy a recording console, and what I really wanted to buy was the next level up console from this. This is a Series 70, and Trident makes a console called the 80 or the 80B, the Series 80 or the 80B. Now, it's really expensive. It's like $10,000 more than this console is. But here's the reality: like this strip right here is literally 95% the same as what is in the 80B, and it's like I got such a good deal on this console that I was like, I have to ask myself the question: Is it going to be $10,000 better than what is in this console? So I ended up with this console, and I'm so glad that I did. This thing, we just call this thing a rock machine. It's like a dirty API, which is another recording console, American recording console. This console is actually from Britain. It sort of has Navy qualities, but it really has a sort of a dirty American rock and roll quality. And you would ask, like, Jeremy, why in the world would you have a recording console that's 45 years old? I'll tell you why: because they don't make them like they used to. This thing is just an inline console, so every little channel can be pulled out and serviced, but every channel has a giant iron transformer in it, and for whatever reason, that transformer just brings like a weight to your sounds, like to your drums, to your bass, to your guitars. It just makes it sound huge, you know. And so this console for me is not really a mixing console. It's really just a tracking console. Like the world, if that doesn't make any sense to you, this means I run all the stuff that I record through this console or through some of the gear over here, and then I just record it into the computer, and then I'm mixing inside the computer, which is called mixing in the box. That's what I do. So this basically was the most affordable way that I could get to have this many really good mic pre's and really awesome musical sounding EQs in one space. So that's why I opted to get this. And so I literally, it was November, it was a Sunday, I literally led worship, and I told Denise, I was like, I told my wife Denise, I'm gonna jump in the car, I'm gonna jump in your SUV, I'm gonna lower all the seats, and I'm gonna drive to Minneapolis. I'm gonna pick this console up, and I'm gonna come home. So literally, like with that plan, I thought I was gonna like rent a van. Like, you can't rent a van after Christmas if you're like or after Thanksgiving if you're like dependent on it. Like, everybody's renting them out for, you know, package deliveries and all that. So I realized, I had the guy measured. I was like, how long is the console? He's like, it's 7 feet, and I was like, there's 7 feet 6 inches of space in my wife's Chevy Traverse. So I put all the seats down, got a Tops barbecue like hamburger, you know, cheeseburger, jumped in the car and drove to St. Paul, Minnesota in one fell swoop in 12 hours. I remember I got there, it was 2 a.m. I slept in this, you know, some seedy hotel, like motel for the night, you know, some Travelocity or Hotels.com deal, and stayed there for a few hours, got up at like 8 a.m. and drove over to the studio. And by the time I got there, between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m., a blizzard was starting to hit in Minnesota. I'm a Southern boy. I don't mess with snow. So I show up to the studio. He's got some buddies there, and they literally pick this thing up. The base is off of it. They literally pick up this thing and manhandle it out of this basement, literally out of a basement, bro. Pull it in and throw it in the back of my car. I load this stuff up, and I basically just was ice skiing home until I got out of Iowa and then drove home. I think I literally stopped in St. Louis to like eat dinner and came home. So like within 24 hours, I had gone to Minnesota, picked up a console, and I was home. And then I was like, where am I going to put this thing? So I had to build this room to put it in, so that's what we did. I don't have tons and tons of outboard gear, but I do have some space to grow, and I do have like the things that I feel like I need to make a record. So most of the like I said, the mic pre's and the EQs that I use are from the recording console. I do have a couple of other like exterior mic pre's. Like this right here is a BAE 1073. It's just a 2-channel 1073. You can't see because I have a bunch of like stickers for what things were. There was a session in here and we were, you know, making sure we knew what was what. So I have a couple of BAE mic pre's, which is basically like a Neve style 1073 mic pre, which is just a different color. I like to explain audio like colors. Like imagine if you had a coloring box, like you wouldn't just want to color with red all the time, right? So this is like, so this might be red and this is sort of blue, you know? I need a blue color to color with, or green, you know? So this is sort of some other mic pre's. This thing is called the Tree Audio Branch, which is just a tube. Mic pre, EQ, and compressor. This thing is just a different color. It's really silky smooth. It's like really a lush, super lush sound. So those are kind of the mic pre's that I use. Also, just so you know, like this Apollo right here is an audio interface, and it has really good mic pre's too. You can, if you were just a person trying to get into recording, you can get yourself a little Apollo, you know, Duo or Twin or whatever they have, and make music. And they have really good mic pre's in that. You can use plugins. Here, the rest of this is really compression because I get most of my mic pre and EQ from the console, but this is an old, couple of old DBX 160 VUs that are super awesome sounding. These are like a more modern version of the same thing, which is the DBX XT. They have a couple of transformers in them. And then these is like sort of my bread and butter stuff. And let me explain something. All of this stuff is kind of studio standard stuff, but I am a musician first. I am not the kind of person who, I didn't go to audio school. As a matter of fact, when I started working at Ardent, John Hampton, who's a Grammy award-winning producer engineer, he produced a ton of bands. I mean, Gin Blossoms, he's got a million Grammys, literally. He's an amazing engineer. I started working there, and I walked in one day, and he goes, "Hey, Jeremy, can you go get this compressor for me?" I didn't even know what he was talking about. He was like, "Can you go get this Collins compressor for me?" And I was like, "Which one is it?" And he was like, "What do you mean, which one is it?" I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So he literally goes, "It's a big gray box with 2 big black knobs on it." Like, he literally had to explain it to me. So from that point on, at Ardent, everybody started calling me Tadpole. That was my nickname at Ardent because I didn't have a clue. But I literally learned so much from these guys, right? So for me, all of this stuff, like we're talking about in this gear again, it's just stuff that I learned how to use, and really and truly like are kind of like industry standards. Like this thing was the Empirical Labs distressor. I have 2 of these. These became really popular in the 90s. It's because that compressor can really emulate any compressor. It can emulate this kind of thing, which is a Teletronics LA2A. It can emulate the Universal Audio Uri 1176, or it can even emulate the DBX 160. So a lot of people love these things because they do a lot of different sounds. What I love most about most of this stuff is like where you have to kind of understand how to use this. This thing like the Highland Dynamics BG2, it's a very mute compressor. It is impossible to make this thing sound bad. And that's really good for me. Like things like the LA2A or 1176 or this thing, it's like they're kind of dumb proof. And I'm kind of dumb when it comes to recording. So it's just sort of like, I just want to be able to plug things up and be able to get a sound quickly. Now I want to say this because I think it's important to say. I'm going to stand back up, but I think it's important to say this. Like, you do not need all this stuff to make a record. You do not. Like, I have friends that literally have a laptop and a little bit audio interface, and they make records that sound better than the records I can make. I'm just being honest. Like, it's amazing what you can do today just in a bedroom. You know what I mean? Like, you look at somebody like Phineas and Billie Eilish. They literally made all those hits like in a tiny little 10 by 10 bedroom. She's like holding a microphone, and he has one of these, and they made a whole hit record with it. I just like using all this stuff because I found over the years of recording, I like to be able to physically touch knobs. I like to hear what I'm doing and turning. And for whatever reason, just getting inside of a computer and just pulling a mouse around to try to get audio, it never felt like tactile to me. It never felt like, I was never comfortable. I've obviously done it because as you build this up and get this kind of gear, you have to sort of go through that process. So for me, I use all this stuff and I like it because I actually can reach over and turn the knob. I can actually like put my hands on things. I've just always been the kind of person who likes to work that way. So if we're gonna really geek out, and I'm sorry for the people who are not technical on here, these actually got pulled over a radio station, which is super awesome. Vintage, or like, it's kind of crazy what vintage gear is going for these days. And I don't even want to talk about it because I didn't spend crazy money for them. But like, what this is I think these two are actually Rev Ds, which I didn't want to think about. I've never even looked at how much they're worth. But like, these are Rev Ds. This is I think this is a Rev E, and this is a Rev F, a Revision F. It means there's different versions. Like, what does that mean? Basically, they started with an A version, and then they made a B version, a C version, as they were trying to like improve it as it became popular. Like, oh, we're going to try to get it to be less noisy, or I want it to react this way. So they did different revisions of all these. So yeah, they are kind of set for things, and that's what's sort of nice about having your own studio space. You can just leave gear set up, which I kind of have like sort of hubs that are sort of set up. Like, I always keep mics on the piano, or I always keep a mic out ready to record acoustics, or vocals are ready to go, or drums are ready to go. So some of this stuff is kind of set for that. And this stuff changes. It can be used for anything. But again, like for me, I love this stuff because it's just easy to use. It just makes sure it makes what you're recording sound like a record immediately. Does that make sense? It sounds like the finished product, I learned a long time ago by being around real recording engineers, and I'll just say this, I do not consider myself that. When you get around somebody who's a real recording engineer, somebody like John Fry or John Hampton or Joe Hardy, or some of my guys who are just a few years older than me, a really good friend, Matt Martone or Pete Matthews or Jason Latshaw, all these guys that I worked with at Ardent for years, Skid Mills, Paul Ebersold, those guys are real recording engineers. You know what I mean? Like, they went to school, they understand the science behind it. Literally, if you get around John Fry back in the day, and John Hampton and Joe Hardy, and they were having a conversation, you would feel like the dumbest person in the room. They are truly scientists, So just being around them and learning what it means, what the kind of things that you need to use to make a record sound good is huge and paramount. And the most important thing that I can say about making records is just like, have really good drums if you want really good drum sounds, and put the mics in the right place. All those things, all of that stuff matters. Like, you can have all the good gear in the world, but if you don't have a good drummer, and you don't have a good song, and you don't have a good singer, there's no gear in the world that's going to magically fix that. Right. So I'm so grateful for those guys. I know I keep talking about them, but that's the reason why Paloma Sound even exists, because those guys are just were huge in giving away the things that they knew. They didn't keep secrets. They were really actively teachers to all of us younger guys. They wanted us to know how to make records and make them well. So I got these monitors a few years ago. I think they're Barefoot Footprint 01s. There's 01s or 02. They're the bigger version. I can't remember what they are. I can look. Let's look and see. I bet they say that on the back, but that's what they are. They're Barefoot Footprints, and they are the 01s. They're the 01s. The 02s are the little bit smaller version. So I love these boxes. They sound really, really good. For years and years and years, I used just a pair of Yamaha NS10s, which is sort of the studio standard. They're literally still over in the corner. You can see the layer of dust on top of them. But I got these speakers right before we opened the studio, and instantly I just noticed that my mixes were so much cleaner. Like, I remember years and years ago. So the NS10 is really a speaker that's made to sort of emulate a home audio speaker in the 80s and 90s. So hey, if it sounds good on this speaker, it's going to sound good on anybody's boom box or home hi-fi or whatever. So, but those speakers sort of had limitations. They have a boost at like, they have like a 3 dB boost at like 7K. There's just things about them that you sort of had to know about the speaker if you're gonna use them. But as soon as I got these footprints, I just noticed that everything was right. My low end and my mixes are right. Everything was just tighter. It actually has like this little bitty switch right here that you can switch between flat or hi-fi or old school. Old school is supposed to emulate an NS10, and The cube setting is supposed to emulate like the old Ableton speaker, but I don't use this at all. I don't think it sounds like them at all. I think it's a kind of a cool idea. It's basically like an EQ curve thing. I just don't mess with it. I leave it flat. But that's why I use these boxes. I love them. I'll be honest. I wish they got like 5 dB louder. I'm kind of a loud guy. I like it loud sometimes, and so I wish they just got slightly louder. But they're appropriate for this size room. I'd love to have the big boy version of there. It's called the Micro Main. I'd love to have it. Maybe one day I'll have them. But for right now, I'm content. They sound really, really good, and they get the job done. So much so that I used to have the NS10s and these set up, and eventually a buddy of mine came in and put a big monitor up here when he was working, and he took them down, and I never put them back up. I just work on these. I know them. I guess the most important thing about any speaker, it's not about how much it costs. It's knowing it. Knowing what things sound like coming out of it and just being comfortable with it. If you just know any speaker, it doesn't matter if it costs $500 or $200 or $17,000. Like, knowing your speakers is the most important thing. So I know them and I love them. They sound really good. I'm gonna just sort of tell the truth about these rooms. So this room right here, starting out with, this room is a combination of kind of how Ardent Studio C is laid out, like window wise, like sort of like you would look out this way. Now the door would have been over here at Ardent, but you would always look through to like one little small ISO booth, which I'll take you into, which I always loved. So this room is sort of a combination of Ardent Studio C and a place in Nashville that's one of the coolest studios in the world that a guy named Paul Moak owns, and his studio is called The Smokestack. And so his place sort of looks like this, but what I most wanted in here was I wanted the ability to have natural light in the studio. Most people don't realize, like, there's so many studios, people just have to find sort of a commercial space, and they really don't want anybody looking through the windows. They don't want anybody to know what's in there. So for us, I was like, I wanted it to feel like if it's daylight outside, like sadly today, you can see out here, it's very rainy today and gross. It's like November, it's disgusting outside. So it's gross, but I wanted to have natural light in here. So that's kind of my motive to do this. And in some ways, it's probably not the best idea because there's probably more glass in here than there's supposed to be, but you know, what are you gonna do? I opted for aesthetic over sonics, but the mix position's okay. So you can see in here, this is sort of a large ISO booth. So the way you get into the live room, you have to go through these 2 ISOs. This is this is sort of our piano room. We cut vocals in here. We'll put guitar amps in here. This is catch-all corner. If you see this, every studio has a spot where you got to have stuff. Like, this is a giant crate full of guitar pedals, you know, things that we have to have. A P bass, because every studio has to have 1 or 5 P basses. We literally have 4 P basses here. It's like the, you know, it's not a bass unless it has 4 strings and it says Fender on it. That's what I think. So this is sort of where we play keys. This is an old 70s Yamaha piano. It's kind of looks rough, but believe it or not, it sounds amazing. Every person I'm not a piano player, but every person that every guy that comes into plays is like, dude, this thing sounds awesome. And so originally I was thinking about buying I don't even know what I was thinking. I was going to buy a grand piano, but I don't know where I'd put it. You know, it would be taking up this whole room, but this thing just goes on to tape really awesome. It records really well. And so this is sort of piano room. We cut guitars in here. Sometimes we cut vocals. It's actually big enough that if you wanted to, you could actually set up a drum kit in here and have more of a dead drum sound, which, believe it or not, I'm not done because my main drum room is just a super rock and roll room. It sounds really, really live and really big. So, but if I ever need a 70s dead drum sound, this is the room I would cut the drums in. So this is the large ISO, and then you walk through here and there's sliding doors, all that stuff. Isolation. This is sort of the small ISO. We sing a lot of vocals in here. We cut a lot of acoustic guitars in here. And this is an old Baldwin bass amp that, believe it or not, this is the same amp that Willie Nelson plays Trigger through, and it belongs to my buddy Derek Shipley. So he leaves it over here. We cut bass to it sometime. It's kind of a kitschy, weird sound. So this is kind of vocal acoustic world, which this is my favorite sort of acoustic mic, which is a vintage Neumann KM84. Which is super awesome mic. I'm lucky to have three of those mics. I actually have a matched pair and then a single mic, and I leave it in here. And this is sort of my main, I have sort of 2 main vocal mics. You can see this is a Neumann U67. And then I have a Bach Audio 251. If you know anything about audio gear, I'm sure that if you're not an audio person, you've already clicked off this link or you're asleep by now. So a couple of audio mics the Bach's put up, but there's sort of just two different flavors. Again, like it's like having a coloring box. Like this does yellow and the other mic does, orange. You sort of whatever the person who's singing sounds best on. It's nice to have a few different options. So that's sort of like, vocal land or acoustic land. And what's nice is you can see, they can see through here if I'm tracking. It's just private enough that I sort of have to lean over to see them, but I'm not like staring at them singing vocals. I'll tell you, one of the biggest things about having a studio space is trying to make people feel comfortable. And most people are pretty vulnerable, feel pretty vulnerable and exposed when they're singing or playing, and they're trying to tap into emotion. So what you're trying to do is make people feel as comfortable as possible, because a lot of people come into a studio and they get in their head about what they're doing, and that's what you don't want to happen. What you want is the best as you can to try to help people be comfortable enough to even forget that there's a microphone standing in front of them and just have them sing and perform, because that's how you're going to get the best performances. And so that's what all this is really about, just trying to create an environment where people are just comfortable, So this is the small ISO, and all these, you sort of head through these two rooms to this live room, and you'll immediately hear that it's much more live. It's very dead in there and very controlled. This room, we'll turn the lights up so you can actually see here. This is sort of the grand central station of Drumville. This is where we track drums, or if we have a full live band, you can put everybody out here. I mean, I've had 6 guys out here before, playing keys or playing guitars, and you can see it's sort of mid-century modern. This room is sort of based off of a producer guy that I love. His studio space looks a lot like this. It's a guy named Jonathan Wilson. He produced like Father John Misty and Dawes and just a bunch of bands that I love. Lana Del Rey, just a killer engineer. And his live room sort of looked like this. And I thought, well, this is super cool. So we put all the wood on a slant. It's just a cool live drum room. And so we track drums, we do keys, but again, we just wanted it to feel like a comfortable place. That's why there's couches in here. It's like you can sit down and play bass, or you can lean back, put your feet up, you can play guitar. I just want it to be relaxed, One of my favorite producer guys is a guy named Daniel Lanois. I think anybody who's in the music world would say Daniel Lanois is one of their influences. If you like organic or real sounding music, he produced U2 and, the Joshua Tree, all those records with Brian Eno. And so I've always looked at his setups and thought it's amazing, because he'd just go take over a house in New Orleans, there'd be recording equipment everywhere. But there was always just couches and just a vibe, a relaxed vibe. So that's sort of what this is about. There's a bunch of amps. We just got off the road, so this is like road case kind of stuff that needs to go back to its place. But we have guitar amps and bass amps. We have plants, just things that, just make it feel like a home and not a sterile studio. And so this is kind of the world, and I'm lucky for Chris Jackson in this sense, because he helped me sort of plan out the ratios. You can't tell by looking at it, but none of these walls are parallel. Everything in this entire room is on 12 degrees. The ceiling's on 12 degrees. These 2 walls are on 6 degrees. And what it does is it makes a room that's a good sized room, but it makes it sound 3 times as big as it is because of how the walls are laid out. And so I'm super grateful that I've got this place. As a matter of fact, Mark is the first person to ever track drums in this room. We weren't even done setting it up. He was like, hey, can I come track? I was like, absolutely. So we literally set his drums up, put some mics up, and he started drumming. And he's a great drummer, but I literally just told him on the talk, I was like, I'm so happy right now. Because you don't really know what's gonna happen until you put the stuff in here, and make a noise and see what it does. You don't know, because on paper it can seem right all day long, Even in Ardent, it's so funny. Ardent Studio C was designed by John Fry, the smartest man that I've ever met in my life, and a guy named George Oxberger, who's like an acoustician who designs some of the greatest studios in the world. And they built Studio C, and even after building Studio C, they had to make some changes. That's why you look on the wall, and there's these huge triangles on the wall that they built, because they were trying to deal with some flutter echo and stuff like that. So it just goes to show, you never know until you come in here and set it up. So Mark's in here drumming, and I was just like, oh my gosh. It sounds amazing in here. It's just so excited. So I love it, man. I'm grateful for it.
Tell us, you always get amazing drum sounds. You've been around this long enough.
Sure.
Tell us your philosophy. Walk us through how you mic a drum kit and why.
Okay, sure. So I'm sort of a person who believes in having a sound. Like again, like I was thinking about somebody like Daniel Lanois. Daniel Lanois has a sound, like it's his records. And I've always sort of had that sort of mentality about myself. I don't do 25 different things. Now I do have friends who do that, like my buddy Matt Qualtz. The guy is probably one of the most talented guys I've ever been around in the engineering world. He can get a million different drum sounds. He can get a million different guitar sounds. He literally is an artist, a painter. I've always been the kind of person who's like, what I want to do is get a band in the room and I'm here to make their record, not my record. And so I'm trying to capture what they're doing the best I can that's most authentic to them. So for me, things change because of that. Like if you're more of an indie rock person, or you like Tame Impala, or you like, a band like that and you want that sort of drum sound, well, I sort of know what it takes to get that. So that might be a mono overhead, like Cole's overhead. Like I've used different kind of mics, and I'll show you some stuff. Like right now on these overheads are a couple of pairs of Cole's 4038s, which are ribbon mics, So it's a more of a rolled off top end thing, but sort of vintage drum sound. So I might use that for overheads. But a lot of times in here, what I'll use is what I was talking about earlier in the Neumann KM84. Like this microphone is just extremely flat. They're awesome mics. So there's over here to the side because we were using and cleaning them up last night. So I might use those for overheads, and I might use the Coles for a room mic. But for right now, the room mic is this other ribbon mic. It's called a AEA R88. Sorry, they're in bags. I just covered all this stuff up to make sure they don't get dusty or messed up. So that's just a stereo ribbon mic that we use for a room sound, So I'm just a big believer that you put good drums in a good room with good mics, and you're going to get a good drum sound if the drummer's good. That's how it works. Tune the drums up good and put mics in. So for me, as a general basis, this is what I'll use. I'll either use the Neumann KM84, or I'll use the Coles as an overhead. A lot of times I just use a 57 on the toms. Now right now, Matt was over here the other day and he told me to check these out, so we're checking these out. These are little SE, these are cheap microphones, like little SE X1D large diaphragm microphones. But he's like, dude, they sound awesome on toms. And so we were trying them out the other day. I was like, yeah, they sound super cool. But I mean, again, you don't have to have super expensive gear to get a great sound. Like you could use that. That's like maybe a couple $100, or you can use a SM57, Shure SM57, which I use on the snare top and bottom. Sometimes I'll use the Neumann KM84 on the hi-hat. Right now I'm just using literally a handheld Neumann microphone that you would see somebody using singing at church. It's a little 105, KMS 105. But the reason why I use it on hi-hat is because it's hypercardioid, so it's like rejects everything else but the hi-hat. So that's what I'm using right now. On the kick, it's not rocket science. On the inside, there's a AKG D112, which has been around for 30 years, literally. And then on the outside here, I use a Neumann FET 47, which is super cool microphone. You could use that on acoustics or vocals. I mean, Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour was singing on a FET 47. That's the best vocal sound I think I've ever heard in my life. So really simple. But again, you don't have to have 17 microphones on a drum kit to get a good sound. Like I've literally gotten a great drum sound with one overhead, a kick mic, and a snare mic, and one room mic. And if you had 4 channels, you could figure out a way to do it. If you can find the best place that you can record, put your drums in there, and find the best place to put the mics, and just let it rip. Like at the end of the day, it's nice to have all this stuff, but again, you don't need all this stuff. So just a couple of different snare drums, like the Ludwig Black Beauty, or I've got a 90s Yamaha Maple Custom. I find pretty much if those 2 drums can't get it done, then there's something wrong, because they're great rock and roll drums. So, and then again, good cymbals, good drums, like just the best things that you can get, because what you want to do is try to get the best sound at the source you can get before you ever put mics up or put cables up or any of that stuff. So that's kind of what we use. And we just use a simple headphone system, the Behringer headphone system. If you lead worship or play at a church, I mean, there's plenty of those on plenty of stages everywhere. That's what we use to communicate, do headphones with. It's really, it's not impressive. It's just tools to get the job done. You know, the A100, the C3 and the B3 are actually the same organ. The guts of it, like what's inside of here, this is exactly the same. And the only thing that's different about it is the cabinet on the outside. So this is the A100, which would have been more the home organ version of it. So it's sort of meant to go up against the wall at a house. The B3 was the one that had sort of the stilted legs. And the C3 was more like an ornate, like a church organ, you know. And so again, it's all the same guts, so it sounds the same, you know. And then I just have an old 122 Leslie over here that's, you know, kind of, they're made to go with each other, you know. So I'm grateful that we live in the South and there's still like things like this running around. There's things like this still pop up on Craigslist, you know. So literally like on a Sunday afternoon, I'm calling a buddy, hey, can I borrow your van? I got to go to, you know, Helena, Arkansas, and pick up an organ, you know. So you can still find things like this. So I'm grateful for it. It's a sound, you know. Music is fun. Like anytime you get to come into a studio, it shouldn't be stressful. It shouldn't be, yeah, it's work, don't get me wrong, but it shouldn't be something that you're dreading. It should be like, it should be a good time. You should be enjoying it. Like this is based around creativity, number one, and then number two, it's based around community. Like you're with other people, you're getting to create together, you're getting to laugh together, you're getting to eat together, you're swimming in the pool together, which is sadly covered up and covered in leaves right now, but like you're getting to do all these things because that's the goal, right? The goal of music anyway, in making music, is connecting with other people. You're making music because you want to connect what the art that, you know, God has given you, or that you feel that you've been given to give to other people, because you want to connect with them emotionally. You want people to see what you're creating, and even in the moment, that's what you're here to do. You're here to connect with other people and connect emotionally, so you can create something beautiful, you know. I love this quote. It says, what's the chief end of man? And it's to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And I think if you're a person who makes art, you don't have to only paint pictures of Jesus. If you're an artist, to be able to use your gifts to glorify Him. So whatever you're doing, if you're playing drums, or you're painting, or you're writing poetry, or you're writing songs, or you're creating music, you're doing it with the chief end to glorify God in your life. That's what you're doing. He gave you the gift, whether you see it that way or not. That's what He's given you the gift to do. And so it's beautiful to be able to do it with other people in community. Hey everybody, thanks for checking out the video. If you want more information about Paloma Sound, you can reach out to us on Instagram. We're on there, or you can reach out to me personally on Instagram, which is @JeremyHorn, or I'm on Facebook, all those different things. Just reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about making music and figure out how we can help you create something that you'll be proud of and that the world will want to hear. So thanks for checking this out.
Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do so. We'll see you next time.